So farmers in Michigan think the state government's claims are hogwash, but people are also growing more frustrated with the leaders here in Washington. It doesn't seem like they can agree on anything these days, and when it comes to politically neutral issues like maintaining infrastructure and transportation, still, lawmakers seem to be deadlocked. This week, Congress took up a transportation bill, but no one seems to be holding their breath that it will go anywhere. Meanwhile, America's infrastructure is crumbling. Plenty of roads and bridges in desperate need of repair. Take a look at these projects delayed due to bipartisan bickering. Well, the Hudson River Tunnel, the project was canceled in October of 2010, and Governor Chris Christie blames the federal government. Over in Beverly Hills, the subway extension project, it was approved by the Metro Board, but delayed due to a political deadlock. And a very big problem around here, bridges. Over 12% of Washington, D.C.'s bridges are structurally deficient. 6.9% of Maryland's bridges are also structurally deficient. And 9.4% of Virginia's bridges have the same problem. Across the country, the national average is at 11%. So why can't Congress build a bridge and get over it? For more on the issue, I'm joined now by Dan Holler. He's the communication director at the Hertiage Foundation. Welcome, Dan. So these are bipartisan issues, but still no consensus. Why? Why not?
I think what you're seeing here is a really fundamental difference on how we've done infrastructure projects in the past. All too often, we've relied on Washington to be the sort of genesis of what bridges do we build, what roads do we fix, and that sort of thing. And what we're seeing is that Washington doesn't work. And what conservatives like me and the Hertiage Foundation, Heritage Action, and others would like to see is the federal government get out of it and return that authority to the states where it belongs.
So, you're saying Washington doesn't work, but something has happened along the way because, past presidents have presided over very ambitious projects, things like the Transcontinental Railroad or the Interstate Highway System. So what is it about this Congress that can't seem to pass things that come to infrastructure, things that are in the benefit of everyone?
Well, let's remember the highway system was completed in 1982. I mean, Eisenhower had a great vision and he completed it, and that was fine. But we're still using this old model for something that's been complete for more than 2-3 decades. So what we have to do is reevaluate and say, is Washington now the best place to be funneling money to and then distributing it back to the states? And I would argue no. I mean, what we saw back in 2005 was that 98% of lawmakers voted in favor of a highway bill. That highway bill broke the highway trust fund. It made it go bankrupt. We've had $30 billion in bailouts for it, and we still have all these problems. So clearly the federal government is not the answer.
Okay, so if Washington doesn't work, and, in all these states, they elect these leaders to do this job that right now they can't seem to get anything passed. So what then is the alternative to Washington?
And the alternative is what you're seeing all around the country, whether it's a Democrat mayor in Atlanta working with a Republican legislature down there, to figure out ways to raise funds and tackle local infrastructure projects. I mean, that's sort of the model, is that locally elected officials coming together, crossing party lines, and figuring out what they need best for their state, instead of having money leave their state, go to Washington, and then come back with strings attached.
So you think the money should be allocated locally rather than federally?
I think we need to get the federal government out of it. Look, I mean, the federal government is involved in so many different things. It's impossible for them to do everything well. One of the easy things that they can do is say to the states, you know what? It's your money. You carry out the projects anyway. All we do is make your lives more difficult. So we're going to let you keep the money. We're not going to take it. Do what you need. If you need to raise your local or state gas tax, that's a decision you can make, and you can explain it to your constituents, and that's fine. But you don't need us being involved in your daily road projects.
Now, we're seeing a lot of issues are just at a deadlock right now. Would you say it's all politically motivated, not being able to resolve these issues instead of, making decisions in the best interest of the people, which is what they're elected to do, that they're instead motivated by politics?
I sort of reject this whole notion that everything is politically motivated. I think one of the things that you're seeing in this country is a real fundamental divide, and that divide is, what's the proper role of the federal government? Do you want to have the federal government be more involved in your daily lives, what happens in the state economy, who builds the bridges and roads, or do you want them to be less involved? And I think that's a real turning point, because in the past you'd have Democrats want a lot of involvement from the federal government, and Republicans would say, yeah, we want a little more involvement from the federal government, but not a lot. And now I think you're starting to see Republicans say the federal government has grown too far. We need to figure out how to pare back its authority and really return authority to individuals, the private sector, and the states.
All right. So, this lack of compromise, not a lot getting done here. Things like infrastructure are being left neglected. So ultimately, how is this affecting, everyday citizens here in the U.S.?
No, I think we can look at all these little issues and really say they undermine the trust and the faith that the American people have in their federal government. That's a huge problem. But I don't think that's going to change simply because Washington politicians come together and say, you know what, the way to bridge this impasse is to go spend more money. I think ultimately what needs to happen is Washington needs to say, look, the American people are sick and tired of us doing what we've been doing for the past several decades. We need to stop spending money. We need to stop growing government, stop feeding into the special interest, and really return power where it belongs. I think that's the only way you're going to restore faith in the institutions and really get the economy going.
All right, interesting take there. Thanks for coming on the show. That was Dan Holler. He's the communications director at the Hertiage Foundation.